talking nerdcore, talking nerdcore today. We're talking nerdcore our way. We're talking nerdcore today. We're talking nerdcore our way.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Talking Nerdcore. I am your host, the animeoveranalyst, and today's episode is basically going to be a solo episode of me talking about my journey through anime. So, normally I would have a guest on, however, just because of some late minute scheduling issues that came up, I was unable to schedule a guest in time. So, instead, I'm doing this episode completely alone, and I figured, hey, instead of skipping the episode, let's actually kind of introduce myself a little bit. So, yes, if you're listening to this on Spotify or any other podcast platform, basically, I am a YouTuber from the YouTube channel, The Animeoveranalyst, and all I do is whatever I really want to do, honestly. So on my channel, I react to nerdcore artists, and I also make reviews. I do Kingdom Hearts theory videos pretty much every Thursday, and those are a lot of fun. So even though I say anime, I kind of branch out and do all sorts of stuff. So that's just a little bit of a rundown of my YouTube channel. You can always check that out. Link is in the description of the podcast, and for most of you, you're probably listening to this podcast on YouTube itself. So, my journey into anime pretty much started in high school. I mean, in elementary school, I watched Pokemon and Yu Gi Oh! And all that, but I always considered those cartoons. I never really considered those anime. Instead, what I ended up doing is watching Maggie for the first time in high school. And the show was recommended to me by a close friend of mine. My friend was actually the founder of the anime club in my high school. Now, I never joined the anime club in my high school. I had a lot going on in my plate because I was constantly doing other activities besides watching anime. And so I decided not to partake in that club. However, I still had friends that were in that club that would constantly recommend anime to me. And so I was like, you know what? Why don't I check out Maki? And it was pretty much the first anime that I had ever seen. I think maybe Blood Plus may have been first. It's a vampire one, but it's really weird and it's out there, and no one really knows about Blood Plus. And I remember at the time liking it, but now I would need to rewatch it because I remember very little of that anime. But Magi, on the other hand, was an anime I loved. I adored Magi. And those of you on YouTube and maybe on Spotify, though I doubt it, you can see this collage that I made of all my favorite anime characters for the most part. And you can see Aladdin in the right hand corner. And Aladdin is a very interesting character in Magi. He's like a lot of, I guess, lolly type characters. He's hundreds of years old, but he looks like a kid. And what I really liked about his character is just that kind of genuine, like, I want to be a friend. I just want to help people. Like, that type of character gets to me. I love those genuine characters. And if you listen to my last podcast with Rhyce Records, I talked about how genuine characters where they want to do genuinely good things get to me and my core. And that could be because I am a Boy Scout and I am an official Eagle Scout. So I've grown up having to just do the right thing and being taught the right thing. And so characters like Aladdin, I love doing. Even Alibaba from that show, even though he's kind of annoying, he also really wants to do the right thing. He just kind of does it the wrong way. Like joining the fog troop, for example. What a stupid idea. But yeah, he did that. And of course, from that show has one of my favorites female characters in Morgiana. I love Morgiana. Now, I'm not very much into waifu material, but I make exceptions for certain characters. Morgiana is one of them. And not only does she just look hot, but she also is a really well written character. So I'm not gonna spoil too much of the anime for anyone who hasn't watched Magi. I definitely recommend watching Magi. But Morgiana was a slave that constantly was being told, you're nothing, you're dirt, you're this and that. And in the first episode, Aladdin comes up and he's kind of lost. Like he's really unsure of what he's doing. He sees Morgiana in chains and he's like, "Oh, wow, you're in chains. Why don't I set you free?" And he breaks the chains. And then Morgiana does nothing. She is so terrified of her master, she refuses to run away. And that really talks about her character, and she goes through an amazing character arc where she tries to overcome the effects of being a slave and being brutally beaten as a slave. And it's so disturbing, but I just love her character. Now, towards the end of the second season and then in the manga, her character gets kind of shafted, and it makes me really sad because she has so much potential. She became super incredibly strong because she's from a race of strong individuals, the Fanalis, who are naturally born incredibly strong characters. And so I love her development because outwardly she's strong, but she's weak on the inside. She's emotionally weak and she's trying to overcome that. And then she becomes such a solid character. And then it's kind of like the mangaka forgets about her. So that's kind of my gripe with Magi. I definitely recommend watching the anime. And if you're still interested after watching the 2 seasons of the anime, check out The Adventures of Sinbad and then check out the manga. Finish the manga. It is definitely worth the read. It's not that long, and you get a really good grasp of what the anime was leading up to and just how much the world explodes after the second season. Like the fact that they didn't keep going just baffles my mind because it's such a wonderful anime. So, I definitely recommend anyone to check it out. So that was my early experience in high school. And from then on, I didn't really watch too much more anime. Basically, for a while, I was watching a lot of Pokemon, like OG Pokemon, but that was mainly for nostalgia sake. And even then, like, I found it out that I just kept getting tired of Pokemon. Like, I only was able to watch to, like, the Johto League. I think that's the third one. And then after that, like, I just couldn't keep on going. Just how repetitive it felt, and then, Ash Ketchum being kind of an idiot just doesn't help the cause. So, after I finished watching Pokemon, I didn't really get back into anime. And for several years, I didn't really watch anymore. And then I checked out Naruto. And Naruto, I had always been kind of hit and miss. Even as a kid, I remember watching an episode here and there of Naruto. It was one of those shows my parents wouldn't let me watch because of violence. And so, like, I never watched Naruto and never watched Dragon Ball. However, I watched Naruto for like the first time straight through when I was in college. And at first I was like, okay, it's just kind of a stupid fighting show. And then as it kept on going, I was like, oh, this is actually getting real interesting. Like, I enjoyed the Zabuza arc. And then when we got to the tuning exam, I was like, dang, this is actually a decent show. Like, I was really, really into it. And so I kept on watching Naruto, and I did that for a while until I got to Shippuden and I got to the war arc. And I tried getting through the war arc. Like, I fought my way through the pacing issues. Like, I even looked up when the fillers were for like the killer bee type of side plot that was going on. Now, keep in mind, at this time, I didn't really look up fillers. I always kind of expected the fillers to be there, but like if I was seeing that a episode was feeling like filler, I'd skip it then. Otherwise, if I was entertained by it, I was like, okay, we'll keep on going. But like the entire end of the original Naruto, I pretty much skipped because that entire end is filler for some reason. And then when we get into the war arc and the fights just get dragged out forever and ever, I was like, you know what? I'm not going to keep on going. And so that was kind of sad. Now, I do know what happens at the end of Naruto, and of course, Boruto is a thing, so I know what happens. And so I'm not too terribly bummed about that. I mean, Naruto had some really, really good arcs, and I really enjoyed most of what I saw. In fact, one of the things about Naruto that I really thought that they were going to include but didn't was this kind of minor arc with this character named Sora. And Sora was basically kind of like half a vessel of Kurama. He had some Nine Tails energy in him, and I thought they were going to do more stuff with him, and then he turned out to be just a minor character in a filler plot, which I literally thought was canon. I thought that entire plot was canon, and it turned out not to be, and I was really confused until later on when I found out it wasn't canon. So there was a lot of potential for Naruto, and it just didn't quite live up for me, but overall, it still had some really cool characters. Like, I love Itachi, I love Deidara, I love the ship between Hinata and Naruto. I was shipping them since like episode 1, honestly. Now, Sakura, I was like, okay. To be honest, I was never really like a diehard hater of Sakura. I thought she was kind of there, and that was about it. Like, there are people who just douse her, and I'm like, well, I get the understanding. She's really is useless, and there's times when she even hinders the story more than helps. But it never really bothered me, at least with the first watching. And that's kind of how I am with really most things I see, is that for the most part, things don't bother me. But, anyways, we're gonna just kind of move on. So, I was watching Naruto, and then I watched basically nothing else after like bits and pieces of Naruto. Basically, like there were times when I dropped Naruto and picked it back up. It was over like a 2 to 3 year span. So I didn't like watch it continuously throughout. So there during one of the times when I was not really watching anime. I was working at this kind of fast food place called Potbellies. And if you know Potbellies, it's basically a Subway slash Jimmy John's. It's like a mixture between Subway and Jimmy John's. And basically, you make a sub sandwich and you send it through an oven and it on a conveyor belt. And that heats things inside. So instead of like the whole microwave oven that like Subway uses, you toast your bread through like an actual oven. And basically, while I was working there, I had a friend that was huge into fairy tale. And I was always kind of sitting there and I'm like, I'm not really into anime anymore. Like, I tried watching Naruto, I was like, eh. And I tried, like, watching other stuff here and there, but I was just kind of, like, not into it. But he was like, man, you gotta check out Fairy Tale. You gotta check out Fairy Tale. And I was like, okay, okay. Little did I know this show would really change my life. And so Fairy Tale for me, it's going to be in one of my top favorite shows. And let me explain to you why. So, during this time period when I was working at Potbellies, I was dealing with a lot of depression and anxiety issues, mainly from just home life, as well as just the fact that I had dropped out of school and I didn't really feel like I was doing much in life. And I didn't have any friends to connect to, like, at all. I didn't talk to anyone. I was literally alone dealing with family issues, and it was really taking a toll on just my mental health. I was just constantly depressed, and I constantly was feeling like I wasn't doing anything in life. And then my friend recommended Fairy Tale to me, and so the first couple episodes, I was like, it's okay. And I was just kind of watching it because it was just kind of stupid fighting. Like, there really wasn't any drama per se. And I even told my friend that at the time. I was like, yeah, it's okay. And he was just so hyped. Like, he was constantly talking about just how hyped things get. And he was just loving like Natsu's fighting skills, and he was talking about these theories of like what if Naruto and Natsu and Luffy from One Piece, they're all the same character, just in different universes. And I'm sitting there like, okay, this is actually kind of cool. We'll just keep this in the back of my mind. But he's like, no, just keep on watching, keep on watching, keep on watching. And so I got to the what was it? Heaven's Tower arc. It's the one with Jalal, and we get Urza's backstory. And that was when I was hooked into Fairy Tale, because we finally got to see a deeper level to the show. And I was captivated by Urza. Her backstory is so amazing. So, for most of you Nard or Fairy Tale fans, you'll know that Urza grew up practically as a slave, and now you're starting to see some similarities with like her and Morgiana. But she takes a completely different route. Urza grows up as being a slave in this place called the Tower of Heaven with Jalal, her friend, as well as a whole bunch of other friends that she was with. And eventually, what happens is that Jalal takes over the entire. I won't say prison. It's kind of like a not necessarily a sanctuary. It's literally called the Tower of Heaven. Basically, it's these priests that were trying to find a way to connect to heaven or summon demons, or it was, weird fairy tale stuff like that. And they had these kids as prisoners that did all the manual work. Anyways, Jalal took over the entire tower, and he got possessed in a way that I won't go into too much of spoiler territory, but he basically turned on Urza, and Urza had to escape, essentially, never to come back. And instead of feeling kind of down and out like Morgiana did, she learned to become more strong and independent, also like Morgiana. So basically, we get to kind of see her develop as a character and enter the Fairy Tale Guild. And we really get to see how the Fairy Tale Guild itself is like a family. And that was like the first step for me personally, kind of fixing myself, because now I felt like I was a part of something. I was watching Fairy Tale and I was like, I felt like I was part of the guild. I was laughing along with Elfman whenever he makes a manly joke, or when Natsu and Gray go head to head trying to take each other out. I was constantly dying laughing because their dynamic is amazing. And then Urza comes up and just pummels the both of them, and I'm just sitting there, and I loved it so much. And so after watched it, I kept on going, and then right after that, we had the whole Battle for Fairy Tale arc where Lock. Wait, was it Loxus that came in? No, no, no. I think before that arc, we had the Phantom Troop. Yeah, not Phantom Troop, but the Phantom Guild arc, and that's where we get to meet Gajiel and Juvia. And that whole arc was insane because we also get to see some of Lucy's backstory and how she grew up as a rich family, in a rich family, but she hated that life and wanted to go out and learn magic and stuff. And so I loved that, as well as the fight between Gajio and Natsu, and then their dynamic afterwards. And then I got to start to seeing Gajio's character development. What this show really, really does well is showing character development of minor characters. And I saw a YouTube video from Nux Taku about Fairy Tale and how was saying that Fairy Tale was almost fantastic, great, but it just dropped short of one thing. And he was talking about how the show really should have focused around the guild, and I can't agree more. Like, the more I watched it, the more I was invested into the guild. And then later on in the series, it mainly focused around Natsu, Lucy, Urza, Gray, Wendy, who joins later, and other characters. And so, even then, I was still invested, even with all that, because I just loved some of the core themes of Fairy Tale, which were family, which were friendships, which were trying to stay positive in negative situations. And that there was really what helped me get out of my depression and my anxiety. It was really me learning how to stay positive, and characters like Natsu just overcoming the negativity and being able to smile in the weirdest things. And for example, the whole Grand Magic Games, which is a fantastic, the best arc in Fairy Tale. There, Natsu and Gajil are up against two other like super strong like opponents that were named Sting and Rogue. And earlier on, Sting and Rogue like floored Natsu. They had pummeled Natsu, and then we get this kind of rematch, and Natsu freaking kicks Gajil down a mine shaft and was like, hey, we're just gonna take this whole thing on myself. And he gives this kind of grin, and I am ecstatic. I'm so hyped because this show is so good at hyping me up, and I'm like invested in the whole series. And just that whole mindset of like, okay, I'm going to force myself into what looks like an odd predicament because it's going to be a 2-on-1, and I'm going to smile through this because I'm going to have fun with this challenge. And just that whole mindset changed my entire mentality and really helped me get out of my depression because, like I said, during this time I had no friends at all, really. And even like later, like the my friend that I would talk to not to with, I wasn't actually ever able to get a hold of him again after I left Potbellies, and I left Potbellies early on when I was watching Fairy Tale, so I couldn't even talk about it to him and how hyped I was. So in the end, I ended up just sitting there and just falling in love with the characters and falling in love with the whole dynamic and just being a friend. And so that's just kind of my 10-15 minute rant on Fairy Tale and just a little bit of like why that show has affected me and has really helped me guide me into the anime community even more because after watching that, I was like, okay, I want to see more different types of cool power systems, and I wanted to see more stories and more different convoluted stuff. And so I started watching Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood, and that one was also quite fascinating because you have two dudes, Alfred and Edward Elric, who literally are struggling through life because they lost their mother and they tried bringing their mother back and they screwed up big time when doing that. And so they're trying to live the rest of their life trying to fix that one single mistake. And I love that. And even in that show, seeing Edward just laugh at some of the what looks like most inopportune times or just finding the little things in life that helped me get through struggles so much because I like I said I was kind of going through some stuff, and so just that's why all this anime felt so important to me. And I am so thankful to my friend, the coworker that I had that introduced me to Fairy Tale because it got me back into anime. So after that, I started watching other anime, like I said, Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, and I watched all 80 of those episodes and loved it. And then I watched Tokyo Ghoul. I loved the first season of Tokyo Ghoul. I thought it was amazing. And I thought it was really well done. Like when they played the intro to at the end of, you know, that show, I was just so hyped, and I need to go and talk about intros also at some point because like Fairy Tale's intros were also something that helped me get through life. But I'll probably come back to that in a second. Let me continue talking about just kind of my progression through anime. So I watched Tokyo Ghoul, was super hyped with the first season. The second season really let me down, and I was so confused at the end of the second season. Like, I was sitting there and I was like, we ended on this? They killed one of my favorite characters, another genuinely nice dude. He was like the friend of Kaneki's, and he just kind of died. And it it was weird to me. I was like, he's dead, and all the other characters there weren't doing much of anything, and I was just so confused. Kaneki went on this whole emo trip, and I was just sitting there like, okay, like I can fit in with the edgelordness, but I guess maybe I don't know. And so I didn't watch any of the following Tokyo Ghoul because there was no point to me. Like I lost interest. We immediately went into and I was sitting there's like, who's this guy that kind of looks like Kaneki but doesn't? And I'm like, I don't even care anymore. And so that was my disappointment with Tokyo Ghoul. And so after that, I think I watched Death Note for the first time, and that show was amazing because it's Death Note. Now, I do have gripes with like the second half of Death Note. Honestly, after what happens with L, I was kind of like, I don't really care. However, the ending is still fantastic. One of the greatest endings in anime. Uh, totally. I lost track of thought there. So I I loved Death Note, and so there's nothing much else for me to say about that. And then yeah, I've watched other anime here and there, like My Hero Academia, and you can listen in on my podcast interview with Rhyce Records and how My Hero Academia just doesn't really bode well with me. Now, the most recent season got me a little bit more intrigued, I'm not gonna lie. However, season 3 and 4 were so boring to me. Like, I didn't care too much about them at all. And I thought they were okay, but like, I didn't care very much about Overhaul, which was probably the most shocking thing about, my takes on MHA. I didn't care at all about Overhaul. I liked Gentle Criminal and La Brava more because they felt human to me. Like they were dealing with actual human issues. And I was sitting there, it's like, Overhaul's like, he's part of the Yakuza and he wants to bring the Yakuza back. And I'm like, he just feels like bad guy doing bad guy things. And so that was actually my biggest issue, and still kind of is my biggest issue with MHA. There are so many villains that are there just to be villains, and they don't feel nearly fleshed out enough for me. Now, obviously, those are about to change. Like we got a Shigaraki flashback that was pretty cool. It was pretty amazing. Not gonna lie. However, I still think he's still kind of bad guy for the sake of being bad guy, and at least his motivations make more sense to me. So he's gone up in my rankings of characters from that show. He's just not towards the top yet because I still don't like his motivations, but that's just part of me. So that's my little thing on MHA. Now, I'm going to quickly talk about Black Clover because Black Clover will segue into Fairy Tale again. Bear with me. So, Black Clover was another shonen that I decided to pick up once I saw recommendations of it from like Nux Taku once again. I think Briggs All Day Anime when it was first airing was kind of recommending it. Like he was okay with it, but like I was kind of seeing it pop up all over the place. And so when it was first starting out, I was like, okay, let's check it out. And I loved it. Honestly, I didn't think Asta was that annoying in the first couple episodes. Like, yes, he was annoying because the voice actor like screams all the dialogues, but he toned it down after a couple episodes, and then after that, I just fell in love with the show. And I kept watching the show and I got super invested into it. Like, I was loving how they were building up each and every character, like Noelle and Vanessa and Finral, all these minor characters. And we were having entire arcs devoted to the minor characters, like Ghosh. We had an entire arc devoted to Ghosh and kind of his mentality and why he's so obsessive with his sister Maria, and I was loving that. And so by this time, I was really getting into like OSTs and the intros, and I love Black Clover. Black Clover probably has the best intros of all of anime. Like, every single intro from Black Clover is fantastic. And I even did a Black Clover opening tier list where I kind of ranked everything. And for the most part, I think there was maybe two songs where I was like, it's good. That's it. All the other songs I was like, fantastic. And then we got to OP10. Let me talk to you about OP10. OP10 is the opening during the the Midnight Sun arc when the devil first appears. And the soft piano intro just loops me in immediately. And after that, I was just so invested in the theme. And I was constantly playing it back to back to back to back over and over and over again. And then I was listening to all the other openings just constantly in a playlist. Okay, we're going to just listen to every single one of them constantly, 1 through 10. And then when 11 came out, we'll do that. And when 12 came out, we'll do that. Like, I loved every single opening. And then I went back and started listening to fairy tale openings again because half of them got me so hyped. Like the Grand Magic Games one. Actually, there was like 3 openings during the Grand Magic Games and they were all super hyped. But the one that got me the most was called Mayusume Chasing. And that song is so hyped because it really got me invested into the story of the Grand Magic Games because that song starts off kind of soft and the opening shows kind of like these darker images and like all the little stuff that's going on, and then it kind of ramps up and is super upbeat because we're doing the Grand Magic Games. It's a game, it's for fun, and we're doing all this stuff. And then the ending of the song starts slowing down again, and we get to see all these really dark images, and we get to see kind of Natsu and Lucy kind of embrace each other, and Natsu trying to support Lucy as she's crying. And you're sitting there like, holy crap, there's some dark shit going on while we're dealing with all these happy, fun, upbeat times, because that's how great this arc is. This arc has a surface layer of fun, energetic games that's going on, and then underneath, there's this subplot where like dark things are really happening. And I don't want to go too much into spoiler territory because I think everybody needs to watch Fairy Tale, but I love the Grand Magic Games and just the different layers it was, and how the song Mayasumi Chasing reflected all these different elements of Fairy Tale. And so I loved that. And then going straight right into Strike Back, which is a different type of feel, but it also fit well. And so once again, I would constantly listen to all of the openings all the time, and I love him. That was another reason why I loved Fairy Tale, honestly, was listening to both the openings and the endings. And I was constantly listening to both of them. I would literally study, like whenever I went back to school and I needed to study, or whenever decided to do writing stuff, because for the longest time I was trying to write a novel, and I'm still am. It's the exact same novel. It's just taken me 4, 5, 6 years to write, and I'm nowhere near completing it. But I would listen to the OST and the openings, and it would get me so incredibly hyped. Like, I would listen to them, and that would just help me get the writing juices flowing. I would just constantly write. I would write pages and pages, hours on end, listening to the Fairy Tale OST and openings. And it's the exact same thing with Black Clover, where, like, now I can listen to the openings or the endings and listen to the OST while I work on video editing, as well as other stuff. And it just makes me so incredibly hyped because they're so well done. And literally, the endings to both series are criminally underrated. I love the endings to both of these series. both visually and audibly. For example, with Black Clover, when it comes to the visual aspect of the endings, you get to see a lot more depressed Asta. You get to see a lot more anxious Asta. He's overcoming these struggles because he has the entire society pushing down on him, going like, dude, you're nothing. You have no magic. You can't do crap. You're not supposed to be here. Go, leave. And he's constantly have this pressure. He has his brother Yuno, and Yuno is like so amazing. He is a prodigy. He looks to be the next Wizard King. And he's sitting there and he's like, how do I reach your level? And just trying to overcome that anxiety and that depression, and you get to see it so well because of the abstract art in the endings. It's so good. And so that might be my next series after I finish doing the Black Clover opening breakdowns. I might go back and start tackling the endings because I love every single one of their endings and how they showcased the mental issues that Asta was going through, as well as some of the other characters, because it wasn't just Asta. Sometimes it featured Noel, sometimes it featured Nero or slash Secre. Like, there was so much that went on with those openings and endings, and I love them all so incredibly much. And then with Fairy Tale is a lot different in that because Fairy Tale mainly focused on a single character, usually the character of the arc, and then we get to kind of see their progression. And once again, they're kind of dealing with anxiety and depression, but it's a lot different. And the best way I could describe it is it's more of the just calm. It's more of a calm, just kind of, okay, I'm understanding how things are going and just kind of dealing with it. And I think the visual that best represents that is the what I call the clock in the ending. And it's something that they've featured in every single ending up until around the time skip, which made me sad. And basically what the clock meant to me was time passing and just dealing with stuff and accepting it. And you get to see it constantly. I mean, it's symbolized a lot. And I think it's a very underrated symbol because it is a very interesting kind of way to depict how much outside influences affect everybody. And really, it's just really fascinating, and it felt like a hallmark of the fairy tale, at least fairy tale endings, where like you see the clock come up and you're like, okay, think people are dealing with crap. And then they got rid of it at the time skip and they reintroduced it in like the second to last or the last ED. But I was sorely missing that because I felt like Fairy Tale had lost some of its symbolism there. And so I might make a video going more in depth into that. So keep an eye out on my channel because that is definitely one of those symbols that I really, really want to talk about. And here I'm just kind of going off of memory. So I need to do a little bit more research on that. So that'll be something I'll keep in mind. So yeah, that's pretty much been my experience with anime, where the anime that get to me most, my favorite animes, are usually ones with fantastic OSTs, like Black Clover and Fairy Tale. Excellent openings and endings. Once again, Black Clover and Fairy Tale. And then have just this core kind of theme of trying to get through life with a positive attitude. So currently, right now, I'm watching Gintama. I am in love with Gintama. The thing with Gintama is that It is very, very realistic. And you may be sitting there as like, what are you talking about? There's freaking aliens all over the place. How in the world can Gintama be realistic? Well, this is a point that I am constantly hammering home whenever I talk about Gintama. Gintoki is a character who is just trying to pay rent. He's just trying to make things happen day by day. He has his own business. He created his own business in hopes to be able to pay rent and then do the things that he wants. He wants to be a simple character. And you may ask, like, why? Why does he have any higher ambitions? Gintoki doesn't have any higher ambitions because he had higher ambitions once and lost. That's right. He's a shonen protagonist that fought in a war and lost. And you get to see kind of the PTSD that he's experiencing. Once again, OSTs and the anime openings are fantastic. Same thing with the endings. Like, they're so good with, like, showcasing Gintoki's, like, internal struggles that you don't get to see through the show because he puts on a facade. And his facade is this kind of goofy character that is also kind of serious and caring at heart. And he's so incredibly intelligent about it. Like, it's insane how smart Gintoki is because he also overcomes this depression by just being goofy. And oh my gosh, there's so many different levels to Gintama. I made a video separate talking about Gintoki, so I won't go into too much here, but I freaking love Gintoki and all the characters in Gintama. Honestly, I love all of them. I know that there's people who kind of hate this character and that character, and, you know, some of them are kind of annoying, but, like, some of them are annoying on purpose, and they fit their purpose really well. And I love that. And so, Gintama is so fantastic, and I can't wait to finish watching it because I'm maybe a third of the way through. I'm about 150 episodes in, and I love it. It's just so amazing. Like, I just got done with an arc with Kagura, and talk about a strong female character that's so underrated. Like, no one talks about Kagura because she's just there, I suppose. Well, the reason why nobody talks about Kagura is because no one talks about Gintama. That's really it. Like, if you kind of get to see Kagura's mentality, she's kind of stupid, yes, but she's also, like, vastly independent, and she is a flawed character. Every single character in Gintama is a flawed character, and you get to see how they kind of accept their flaws, and their flaws are accepted. And I just love her character so much because she's childlike, but she's also fiercely independent, I would like to say. Yeah, sure, she lives with Gintoki, but she kind of does her own thing a lot of the times. With Sadaharu, the dog she adopted, the giant dog that she adopted, such a fun dog. And so that's kind of my 10-minute rant on Gintama because I freaking love Gintama. I recommend everyone to watch Gintama. There are so many good meta jokes in that one. So, yes, if you can kind of see the theme, the anime that I love the most are the ones that really dedicate heart. And so, I want to end this episode of the podcast with just talking about two anime that I'm currently reading slash watching. Well, okay, one finished, but they directly affect this channel. So the first one is called The Promised Neverland. And before I talk about The Promised Neverland, I also need to talk about Maiden Abyss. So, both anime kind of deal with the same kind of issues. You've got a strong central lead female character who is trying to figure out her way in the world. And when I first watched Maiden Abyss, I fell in love with Rico, and I fell in love with Reg, and I fell in love with the world. However, when I was reading it, and actually, yeah, it was when I was reading it and watching it, I was sitting there and I was like, well, I want to do a review about it, but I don't know how to do it. And so I tried doing a live Twitch review about it. Excuse me. And it didn't go too well. It was quite embarrassing, actually. Like, I had one person show up and just tell me how wrong I was because I was practically wrong on everything. And it didn't felt right. I wasn't sufficiently educated on the show and everything. Like, I was kind of going half-assed and I needed to be more prepared. So, what happened was that I was starting to read Promised Neverland, and I was getting Maiden Abyss vibes again. And this was after I saw the first season of Promised Neverland, and so I was reading it, and I was like, you know what? I want to do these reviews again. I want to start and try it again. And this was after I started learning how to video edit, which saved my life. And I started doing the video editing because that was what I also wanted to do, was practice my video editing. And so my first ever videos on my YouTube channel were reviews of The Promised Neverland. And I would go on and do predictions of what was going to happen in the future and then talk about how I was completely wrong with the predictions and this and that. And I was loving that series. That series got me started on YouTube. It was the series that literally got me invested into doing my YouTube stuff. And so, fast forward to a couple months, and I got the rest of the manga in from Maiden Abyss. And I was like, you know what? I want to tackle Maiden Abyss again. So, I started reading the manga, hand copies this time. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to do a review, volume by volume, and talk about Maiden Abyss. And that's what I did. I started doing volume reviews, and now I'm up to volume 6, where I need to do a review of that. It's been a couple months since I've done a review, because the last one was the Maiden Abyss movie, Dawn of the Deep Soul, I believe was what it was called. And that review was also a lot of fun because I had just watched the movie, I was fresh on it, and I'm at the point where I had already read that arc twice. And I actually did a review of that arc, the manga side, like couple weeks beforehand. So I was already ready for that movie, and I was more on point. And so that's kind of where I'm at now when it comes to all of this anime stuff. And the whole reason why I made this podcast was so that I can even talk more about my ideas with other nerdcore artists, mainly nerdcore artists, because that's the main half of my YouTube channel, where I talk with nerdcore artists. And the entire point of the channel is for us to just talk anime. It's not even really to introduce their music or anything. Like, the reason why I choose them is because, sure, I think it's important for me to shout out their music and their careers, but I also want to see the human side behind people. I want to see what other cool and fascinating things they find in anime. I want to see what they fall in love with. And so I hope that you all take what I said to heart, I suppose, and just check out some of the anime that I recommended. I'm not saying that you're gonna love them. Fairy Tail has a lot of problems that I completely understand. And honestly, it's great. It's a great anime for new watchers. For new anime watchers, I think the more experienced anime watchers take a look at fairy tale and they think it's stupid because they see all the tropes and they think fairy tales are copycats. And I think it's fantastic with newer folks because it really is a good anime to get introduced to other anime. So I definitely recommend that. I definitely recommend Magi because there's a whole political, philosophical discussion about that I have yet to get into and I want to get into. So if you're a nerdcore artist and have watched Magi and want to talk about Magi with me, we can talk about that for an hour. That would be a whole lot of fun. So definitely recommend those two for sure, along with Maiden Abyss, another anime that I wish people like talk more about. It's very low under the radar because of just copyright issues. Really, that's kind of the biggest issue is just copyright issues. And that kind of is sad. So I definitely recommend watching Maiden Abyss because it's such a fantastic show and it's got a season 2 already announced for next year. And I'm going to be doing reviews about that. So I'm excited for that. And of course, I'm reading One Piece and doing One Piece reviews, but I actually haven't really seen them anime. To be honest, I dropped the One Piece anime around Baratier because they introduced a side character called Pearl, and I was like, this is just a dude with a shield. Like, this is stupid. I'm done with the show. That was literally my breaking point. Well, there was also a lot of other little stuff, like I was so tired of One Piece. I didn't like the sound effects and all that. But reading the manga is fantastic, and then watching episodes of the newest arc is also fantastic. So that's my quick take on One Piece. So, once again, thank you all so much because I literally am able to ramble and talk and get these kind of discussions because you guys have supported me on my YouTube channel and as well as just listening on your platforms. It means so much to me. So, I hope you all have a great rest of your days, night, years, whatever you need. I was almost copying Barasu 13's ending there. And y'all take care. I'm the Anime Overanalyst, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.
Talking nerdcore today, we're talking nerdcore. Talking nerdcore our way.